All right, good morning everybody. Welcome to 360 and Dev. It's our last day. This is Android Basics, Continuous Integration. If you're in this room, if you think you're going to see RxJava by Example Part 3 or Spread Your Wings by Spanables, you're in the wrong room. But if you want to nerd out with me and have a lot of fun about continuous integration, then you're in the right place. And I am your cruise director for this adventure. Now, I've been doing Android since Cupcake. In the last 5 years, I was at a startup that got acquired by a Fortune 50 mammoth, helped add 5 million Play Store downloads to their flagship product. But now I'm in stealth startup mode, which is a euphemism for my mom and future employers, which really just means I'm some combination of retired and taking the summer off. And since I'm not going to talk about my day job, I don't have one at the moment, and I'm not going to tell you about my stealth project, either because it's stealthy or because it barely exists. Let's get cozy and intimate and get to know each other. And I'm going to tell you a few things about me, your humble cruise director here on this continuous integration adventure. So to start off with, I do whisper to alpacas. A few weeks ago, fun fact, I was in the New York Times. I was interviewed by a reporter in San Francisco, and it ended up in a Sunday edition in a story on the front page of the business section. I really like hackathons. I'm approaching $50,000 in total winnings. I definitely appreciate those hackathon organizers that put together large novelty checks. Those are the best. Being from Colorado, I am local to Denver. I love my snow sports. Split boarding, snowboarding, ski biking here. This is a great place to enjoy the snow. And as you can imagine, I give a lot of talks. I must have taken a time travel machine to Wen's keynote yesterday and took her advice to heart to get started at meetups and move on up. And I've delivered a keynote in Paris, which is that picture on the right. I've given a talk in Hong Kong, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Texas, Boston, all over the place. And for audiences of 2,000 and more, I will get into makeup. So if you guys are organizing any events, I'm available. I do run the Google Developer Group here in Denver, so if you listened to Wen's keynote yesterday and you are thinking about giving a talk sometime in the future, whether you're in Denver or somewhere else, it's a great place to visit. Come on out. Join the meetup group, contact the organizer, it's me. I'd love to have you here as a speaker. We can work out lodging, we'll make things work. So there's 500 people in the community. We'd love to have your bright smiling faces in front of them. All right, so now that we know each other, we have something to talk about later. We're all socially awkward engineers probably, so now you have some things to approach me and talk to me about if you don't want to talk about the nerdy topic of continuous integration, but I definitely would love to talk to you about continuous integration. And I've had a lot of good conversations with people over the last day or so. I think there is nothing more exciting and dramatic in software engineering than continuous integration. And Charles Dickens predicted this, in a sense, way back in 1859. That dude was smart. He was on point. We're going to have a lot of erudite trivia like this throughout the talk, so get used to it or go check out one of those other talks. So Charles Dickens wrote that it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and really that is the story with continuous integration. Before you get CI, we're going to talk about how it is the worst of times. Once you get CI, we're going to talk about how it is the worst of times. When CI goes down, like I can't tell you how many conversations I've had over the last couple weeks. Last week I was in Las Vegas giving a talk, and I talked to some people at very major companies who were essentially embarrassed by their CI workflow pipeline. And it's a common story that when CI goes down, there's like one person, one woman, one engineer who understands how to make it work. Sometimes it's Jenkins inside a Docker container using Vagrant, and nobody really knows how to restart the thing, or Gradle needs to be updated on the box, and nobody knows how to do that. And when CI goes down, if you've integrated into your company, it is a huge problem because nobody can get builds out. You can't deliver new software to your users. All right, so let me give you a kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. In the beginning of this talk, I'm going to motivate you to CI. I'm going to really sales pitch at you why CI is a good thing, even on your small hobby projects. It doesn't matter how big a company you work for. You're on a Scrum team of 10, Scrum team of 5, you're a lone programmer in a basement somewhere, you should be using CI. We're going to define CI. I use kind of a loose definition of CI. If you're familiar with CI, you'll notice that I kind of use a superset of what technically continuous integration is. I kind of roll in parts of CD, which in itself has two different definitions, and we'll cover that. We'll go through a ton of CI workflow tools and related tools, more than 10 or 12. And this will be kind of your homework for the future. There'll be links to all of them. And if you're not currently using CI, then you'll want to use these tools to add CI into your software development process in the future, and then we'll have some fun along the way. So let's imagine we're a startup. And really, this applies to anybody. You're a startup, it's your own nighttime and weekend project, or really a lot of big companies operate this way. The mantra is, in the beginning it's, hey everybody, we're going to write a ton of unit tests. Espresso is cool. We're going to have espresso tests for everything. We're going to have really well-defined requirements before engineers ever start working on code. And then, like, no plan survives the first brush with the enemy. Day one of the sprint, it's like, hey, faster. We just got to get those features out. Forget the tests. Forget the integration tests. We don't have comps. Doesn't matter. Let's ship it out. And so, to kind of give you a feel for why I think this is important, we're going to do a little improv comedy game here with an animated GIF. I got to try and time this right. Okay, so in this scene, I am playing the role of a software engineer that has no CI. Okay, I'm at a company with no CI, and my primary goal is just to ship code faster. All right, let me get the timing right. Okay, all right, I messed up the time. All right, I just shipped 3 new activities. I forgot to add the third one to the manifest, though. That's no big deal, though. Look at all these users downloading my app. What could go? Oh, no. All right. I just added German language support to my app. Did I test it on smaller screens? Why would that be important? I'm sure. Oh, no. And then we'll let this play through once while I set up this next one. This is a real old school one. For those of you who have done coding in the past, here we go. All right. Wait, you mean users can rotate the phone during network activity? Oh, no. Okay. And so if this is too silly or not getting the point across, let's get serious for a second. So Masters of Scale podcast, which I highly recommend you check out. There was an episode with Mark Zuckerberg. I'll refer to him as Zuck because I was once at Facebook in the same room with him, so like I feel like we're close. I was very confused why everybody was talking about Mark. I didn't think I was that important, and then I walked around a corner and I was like, yeah, I get it now. So he tells this same story, basically, that at Facebook, originally, their whole mantra was ship code, ship it as fast as you can. But then they got into this feedback loop where they were having bugs, they were having to fix the bugs fixes were creating new bugs, and everything was just slowing down, grinding to a halt. And so as he says, we needed a new strategy to go faster. What we came up with was we were going to build the best infrastructure. An engineer can come here from any company, is going to be able to ship their product faster, test it better. And that's basically what this whole talk is about, is slowing down to speed up, making sure you have the right processes in place. And, but for those of you who are out there who are maybe just getting started with Android, or you work at a company and been there for a while and don't have CI, maybe you got a little pit in your stomach right now, like, oh man, this is going to be like real serious and we don't do this really well. I want to be straight with you that secretly most of us are terrible. Even like I have friends who work at Facebook, most of every major companies in Denver, we all have complaints. I've had this conversation with a ton of people who are like, yeah, we use tool A, I won't name it, Jenkins. Gosh, why is it so difficult to use? It's really a nightmare for us. So don't stress out if you aren't perfect, but it's important to start somewhere, to have some kind of CI, to be building something on every PR open, not necessarily every commit, to be tracking how your lint progress is going. You want to know if you do a PR and suddenly double your number of lint warnings or lint errors. You want to be doing static code analysis on every build. You want to potentially be automating the process of user feedback and deployment, and we're going to talk about all that stuff here. So first, this is not a new idea. This idea of being efficient by analyzing how the process of creating work is not new. And everybody's familiar with Henry Ford and the Model T and the modern assembly line, which was not necessarily the first, but it was really the first place where there was an assembly line and there were conveyor belts between the different stations. So parts would go in on one end and a completed product would go out on the other end. And this is a good metaphor to think about software. You have ideas and requirements and smart people like you guys in the room, and on the other end, you should just have software that goes out without a lot of work. And you should, without many headaches, be able to just put your head down and code most of the day. Henry Ford, by the way, was a really interesting guy. He was not always successful. He had an aviation company that crashed and burned, no pun intended. That's in a business sense. It crashed and burned. He was also a farmer and a watch repairman back in the day, and a car racer. So what's most interesting to me, though, while I studied about Henry Ford was that, and the process of automating things, is that he was not the inventor of the assembly line. I just kind of assumed he was. He's the inventor of the modern assembly line, which is the one with conveyor belts between different parts. In fact, it goes all the way back to 1104 when the Venetian Arsenal employed 16,000 workers in a huge water-based, essentially old-school assembly line, and gave Italy huge might in ocean-faring activities because of that. And it was such a big deal, had such a big impact on the world, that it actually is mentioned in Dante's Inferno. But this isn't even as old as it gets. It gets even older. More than 1,000 years ago in China, there were assembly lines used to make weapons and farming tools. Okay, so let's deliver this message in a compliment sandwich. I've been talking to all you guys the last couple days. You're all very smart, really smart people. You're lazy. I'm going to throw that out there. And you're incredibly good looking. But the headline news here is that you're lazy. Programmers are lazy, and you might have a different definition of lazy than I do. But if you don't believe me, you can search the internet. There are a lot of really smart computer scientists that will emphasize this point. That here's Larry Wall, here's Bill Gates. And this is a great message here. I choose a lazy person to do a hard job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it. And this is a great metaphor for continuous integration. There are lots of things that we don't want to do, but we know they're good for us. You know, eating our vegetables, going on hikes, and doing important continuation integration stuff like lint check, static code analysis, etc. So by automating and kind of operationalizing all the boring stuff, we can take what Henry Ford and the Venetians and other folks have done in terms of making the delivery of product more efficient, and we can do these boring things every time and kind of piggyback on the good thing about being lazy as a programmer to deliver better software. And then we can be like Michael Guerra, an Italian cyclist who has an innovative cycling technique, and we can just speed past the competition and deliver better software. Okay, so hopefully now you're sufficiently motivated to want to do continuous integration. Let's define it. What's CI? What's CD? So CI is not a new idea. There's a 2006 piece from Martin Fowler. Continuous integration is a software development practice where members of a team integrate their work frequently. Usually each person integrates at least daily, leading to multiple integrations per day. Each integration is verified by an automated build, including test, to detect integration errors as quickly as possible. So we're familiar with this. In Android, it's basically the same story as it was in 2006. Maybe the integrations are more frequent than daily. Maybe we're doing a little more fancy stuff like taking screenshots on multiple different sizes to check out that our internationalization is working, for example. But this is kind of an old idea, and it's definitely applicable to Android development. Continuous deployment, or CD, it's so nice it got definitions twice, I guess thrice if you include compact disks. There's continuous deployment, which is not to production, and this is very common. Most of the companies I work with are doing continuous deployment, and that's through something like Hockey App. It's to beta testers, it's to product managers in the company, or maybe just the developers. If you're a lone wolf, you're just deploying and you're pushing to your phone so that you can open up the app anytime you're in line at the grocery store and you can poke around and just make sure it's still working. CD as continuous delivery, which is kind of a newer concept, is actually pushing out to the Play Store. So the Google Play Store, many of the tools that we're going to go over allow you to automate pushes to the Google Play Store, including to subsets. So you can do alpha beta testing on the Google Play Store and you can push out to those smaller groups. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that my conversation here about CI is really a superset of what CI strictly is, and you can do a lot of great things with CI once you have CI in place. So if you consider strict CI just building your code, making sure that it does build, and perhaps running the unit tests, then you can also do all these other things. Static code analysis, we're going to go through a bunch of tools. There are security static code analyzers, there are bug finding static code analyzers, there are code style static code analyzers. You can run unit tests. I guess I don't have it in there. You can run espresso tests, integration tests like Roboelectric, anything like that. You can save artifacts and reports. This is great, very helpful if all of a sudden your manager comes over and says, "Why do we have 1,000 lint errors?" It's like, hold on one second, boss. And you go and you look back into history and you realize that 3 weeks ago, Todd over in whatever department did a PR, and all of a sudden the number of lint errors went from 15 to 987. Now you've effectively passed the buck over to Todd. So that's good. You can also save other reports from the static code tools. You can do notifications. You can post messages to Slack, like the build completed successfully, the build didn't complete successfully. You can post those to Twitter, to email. There are people who use Internet of Things light bulbs, and they have like green and red. And then there's also kind of a famous internet meme about a company that built a dart machine, and the dart machine shoots Nerf darts at whoever breaks the build if the build breaks. So you can get pretty creative with how you deploy your CI. You can hook into source code repositories, which is amazing. I'm lazy myself, and I don't want to kick off these CI builds. And so to allow the GitHub or whatever source code repository tool you're using, maybe Bitbucket, to automatically run CI for you is a lifesaver. In this wider umbrella of CI, there's also crash reporting and user feedback that can be automated. And when we go through the companies that are providing tools for CI workflow, you're going to see that a lot of them offer that as well. Okay, so here is, I told you earlier that in the beginning I was going to motivate you to be excited about CI. Hope we did a good job with that. And then I told you that we were going to define continuous integration. We did that. And now we're going to go through the tools. This is the homework section. These slides will be available later. There are going to be a lot of links in here and a lot of different tools. So we'll start in the upper left corner. We have lint. Everybody here uses lint, whether you know it or not. So congratulations on already doing some of this stuff. PMD is a source code analyzer. Check style is you guessed it, it's a style analyzer. You can import whatever style you want to use. You might want to use the AOSP style guide. You might be in the camp that hates some of the stuff in the AOSP style guide, so you tweak it. There is Find Bugs, which finds bugs in Java programs. It's a pretty neat tool that does static code analysis. These are some of the things that you can add on to your CI process. And then, so I don't expect you guys to read this right now, but when you look at the slides later, there are links to find all those tools. Okay, I wasn't sure where to put this tool slide. It's really important to talk about the ability to run espresso tests, but it didn't feel like any of those static code analysis stuff, and it didn't feel like the CI workflow kind of mega tools we're going to talk about in a bit, but the kind of de facto best practice place to run espresso tests now, unless you have a closet full of phones, which some people do, is Firebase Test Lab for Android, which is a mouthful. I also didn't know where to put this slide because I was afraid I wouldn't remember the name of the product. This allows you to basically be billed by device minute, and you can run tests in parallel or all on a single device. You can use actual real production devices that are in an enormous closet, probably out in Mountain View, California, somewhere, and you can deploy your espresso tests. And we'll see a little bit later how the CI workflow companies provide reports for these tests. All right, so now the moment we've all been waiting for. What tool should I use for CI? So we're going to play a little game here. It's going to take a little bit of bravery. It's a little bit of interactivity. I'm going to ask you to, at certain times, to raise your hand. Let's practice. Can everybody raise their hand? All right, good. We all have mobile arms. That's great. If you don't, we'll come up with some accessible solution. So if in the last 3 years you have used the tool that I'm currently highlighting, and that can mean in any capacity. You've studied it doing a research report for your company, you're using it on your nights and weekend side hustle, or you use it day to day at the company you worked for or a company you worked for 3 years ago. And to kind of calibrate the room, this is the most brave moment. I need a show of hands for people who in Android, because maybe you're just getting started in Android, so that would be a hand raiser, who has never done CI. You haven't worked at a company with CI on Android in the last 3 years. So, okay, thank you guys for being brave. All right, I'd say that's like, to calibrate, I'm going to call that 15 to 20% of the room has no CI. Okay. Okay, so here we go. So we'll start with Jenkins. Jenkins famous for, okay, yes, all right, you guys are so good. Okay, so let's see the hands. So that's like easily 3/4 of the room. 3/4 of the room has used Jenkins at some point, which isn't a surprise. That's why I led with it. Also because it's on HBO in Silicon Valley. If they choose to highlight it as a CI tool of choice, then why shouldn't you? So here's their website. A lot of people, you know, I mentioned earlier that I've been around talking to companies and software engineers at companies, and people have kind of a love-hate relationship with Jenkins. It's great because it does help programmers be lazy. It helps you deliver better code. It arguably maybe could have a better interface and does require some ninja level skills sometimes to wring out the performance and the extra tricks you want to run in your CI process. So that's Jenkins. Travis CI with Android in the last 3 years? Anyone? Okay, we're going to call that 10%. So that was pretty low. There's probably a reason for that. The word on the street is that Travis CI is pretty slow, particularly with Android. In other platforms, it might be great, but people have struggled to kind of wrest some performance out of Travis CI. But this is another tool you can look into when you're trying to implement continuous integration at your company. Okay, GitLab. Okay, we're going to call that less than 5%. So this kind of new kid on the block. It does all the things that I'm going to take one of these companies later and kind of go through some screenshots and show you what they do for you. This does all those things. Okay, Circle CI, hands in a room. Ooh, that surprises me. Okay, so that was really small. That was less than 5% as well. Circle CI is actually very popular in the Android community. There are a lot of big companies, big name developers who in their side projects are using Circle CI. It's fast. It sounds like it's a little bit of a nightmare to configure. I've seen a lot of kind of chat messages about, hey, how do I can do this Gradle magic on my computer, but I can't quite figure out how to get Circle CI to do that. And so there's been a lot of back and forth. They did just come out with a 2.0 product that I think is in beta. It maybe isn't officially released yet, but there are a lot of people who are very excited about Circle CI. So if you work at a company where you want to get CI in place, and maybe you work with people that really like bright, shiny new things, then maybe Circle CI 2.0 is right for you. Okay, Buddy Build. Anybody? Okay, that is the most surprising. So That had 0% coverage. And so what's surprising about that is when I went out and talked to people, this was the most loved tool of anything. I had a lot of people who said, yeah, I use tool X and I hate it because Y, Z, A. And they weren't even prompted to say why they hate it. When people answered Buddy Build, they said things like, Matt Harris, who works for a local startup, Dispatch Health, just like Uber for doctors, they'll come to you. This was his quote: "It's a complete end-to-end solution that just works, 0% configuration, 100% happiness." So that's what he said about Buddy Build, like instantaneously. He was like all smiles and really psyched about the product. And so because of his ringing endorsement, we're gonna look at some screenshots from Buddy Build, but keep in mind that this kind of tour applies to almost all those other tools. You can do everything, or most of everything that you're going to see in Buddy Build in these other products. Okay, so Buddy Build subscribes to this kind of, yeah, it's a CI tool, but it does a lot more philosophy. There's a superset to the definition of continuous integration. Now they break it into 4 parts. This is kind of their preview slide, what the problems are with delivering great software. So continuous integration is complex and cumbersome. Continuous deployment, it's difficult to provision users. Feedback is inefficient and ambiguous. Analytics and crash reporting, incomplete and lacking context. And they have a solution for each of these. For continuous integration, they make it really easy, as we saw Matt say earlier. For a continuous deployment, they make it super simple to email APKs to your users and manage your users. For feedback, they have built-in feedback tools. They have I don't know if they've patented this term, but they have a rage shake feature, which means the user can shake their phone and then leave feedback with screenshots and annotations and stack traces for the developer and leave very good feedback. And then they integrate with analytics and crash reporting as well. So this is an example. They've recently added a new feature where you can do testing on real devices, espresso-style testing. And this is what their portal looks like. And you can see that they have live video. So anytime there's a crash of an espresso test, you can actually watch the video of what was happening at the time. You can also see the different devices it ran on and see the stack traces. You can download the logs and test reports. So for each test run on physical devices, Buddy Build now provides all the logs generated during the UI test run, a video replay of each UI test run on each device, a detailed call stack for any test failure during test runs. And here's another look at their dashboard. You can see along the top that you can deploy, you can look at Google Play, you can look at your JUnit tests and see how that did. You can see your logs, your details. And so kind of in summary of Buddy Build, you can build your app, run your unit and UI tests. You can deploy your apps to testers and to Google Play, collect user feedback and crash reports, and it's built specifically for mobile developers. And it's Matt Harris approved. So those of you who know Matt can be excited about Buddy Build. But really all those tools I went through are good choices. They're all better than the alternative anti-pattern, which is just let's go fast, let's go fast, let's go fast, because ultimately that's going to send you up in a wave. All these companies, when you go to these websites, are going to have a screen that looks just like this, and they're all basically the same. It's, hey, all these companies use our product, and they all have very impressive lists. So if you're excited by the companies on one of these particular lists, then you can go with that tool. But the important thing is to use a tool and integrate continuous integration. So we're getting close to the end. This is a beginner talk, but I did want to throw out a couple advanced things that maybe you'd like to look into as well. Bazel, has anybody heard of Bazel? Or let's do the hand raising thing. Has anybody used it? All right, nobody's used it, but we have some people who have heard of it. All right, so we're at 0% unused it. Bazel came out of Google. So Google has really big CI problems and challenges and have an amazing system that can run probably millions of unit tests at this point. And it's called Blaze, which is an anagram of Bazel. And they recently open sourced Bazel, open sourced their version of Blaze so that other folks could use it. And it's great for very large projects. There's an emphasis on speed, correctness, and reproducibility. And you can write rules and macros in a language called Skylark, which is a subset of Python. Okay, there's also Buck, which brings us mostly full circle to Facebook, but maybe in a bad way, because as I was making these screenshots, I noticed that the copyright note on their promotional webpage ended in 2013. Does anybody use Buck? Oh, okay. All right, we got more than 0% on Buck, so that's something. Buck was designed by Facebook because they had a lot of trouble building very large apps for Android, lots of lines of code, and so it's a high-performance build tool. I would probably put this towards the bottom of your research list, but you can reach out to the community and see if it's a tool that makes sense for you. So to circle back to Charles Dickens and why I think continuous integration is really interesting. When you don't have CI, we saw in the wave GIF and the improv scene earlier that bad things can happen. You can ship code with errors, production runtime errors, and so it can really be the worst of times. When you get CI and CI is working, it can be the best of times. You automatically know, you have confidence, you feel good about your software working. When you're working on a small team or a large team, you might be stepping on other people's code, and it feels good to know that you're not breaking their code, or when they're doing PRs, that they're not breaking your code. But again, CI can be the worst of times because it's a very common pattern to have a team of, let's say, 10 Android developers at a company, and there's one guy, one engineer who understands how the CI pipeline works. And when Jenkins goes down, or whatever CI tool you have goes down, and that guy's on vacation, or that woman's on vacation, you're kind of like stuck and can't do builds for a couple weeks. And that's a bad place to be in. I want to circle on this kind of pattern concept one more time this is for the old folks in the room that got the joke earlier about rotating the phone during a network call. And has anybody heard of Joel Spolsky? Has anybody ever used Stack Overflow? All right. He created Stack Overflow, or his company, Fog Creek Software, created Stack Overflow, also created Trello. Really impressive guy, worked at Microsoft and then started his own thing and has had 2 mega hits since then. And he used to have one of the original blogs. It didn't look this pretty. I was surprised when I made this screenshot, because maybe 5 years ago I used a similar screenshot in a talk, and it was still his old blog, but somebody finally convinced him to upgrade. This was, what does it say when it was published? 2000. So in 2000 there was like not many, the blink tag was prevalent back in 2000. So this is much prettier than it used to be. And this is kind of it's an article about what you should look at in a company when you're evaluating switching jobs and what kinds of things make for a good software company. And it really focuses on this idea that speed is not the most important thing. We want to work in a sane environment. And so he asked this series of 12 questions. Do you use source control? Can you make a build in one step? And that right there is CI. Do you make daily builds? CI again. Do you have a bug database? Do you fix bugs before writing new code? Do you have an up-to-date schedule? You can see a lot of parallels here between what Joel is espousing and between what I was promoting in the beginning of the talk when I was motivating you guys to look into CI. It's really kind of an anti-chaos pattern. We want regularity. So good on Joel for picking up on that. All right, so in summary, if Dante's Inferno, Henry Ford, and HBO's Silicon Valley have taught us anything, CI is good. It's fundamentally good. You want it. Invest in CI, spend the time at the front so you can move faster later, like amazing Italian bicyclists. And I think That's it, except I'm not going to take questions. I'll take questions directly, but I've brainstormed 3 questions you guys might have. So everybody wants to know, what about Kotlin, right? So how does this, this wouldn't really be a 2017 talk if I didn't roll in some Kotlin. So it's a great question. Thank you for asking. Kotlin does mostly work with CI, except for those static code analyzers. So you might be familiar enough with Kotlin to know that Kotlin creates bytecode that is Java compatible. But just to speed things up, we'll just say that the bytecode is messy. It's something that the static code analyzers get confused by and think is problematic. So there is a static code analyzer for Kotlin, but it hasn't been fully released yet. It's in development now, and it's called Detect, D-E-T-E-K-T. So if you are a Kotlin shop and you want to do CI and you want to do static code analysis on your Kotlin code, you're going to want to look into Detect. Great question. Thanks for asking. What about cost? I am just here as a hobbyist. I like to do Android programming on the side because my day job's in COBOL and it's really boring. Are these tools free? What's the deal? Another great question. Thank you for asking. Go to the websites and check. In general, the rule is Jenkins is free, 100% free, no problem. There are vendors. There's CloudBees is a kind of in the cloud way to easily manage Jenkins instances. But you can, like a pretty common thing at smaller shops is to have a Mac Mini in a closet somewhere that's running a Jenkins instance. And you can do that for free. You can, but most of those other tools, the fancier ones that do that kind of expanded version of CI and deploy to the Play Store and have really sexy reporting, do cost money. And they can get pretty expensive. And the Firebase Test Lab does cost money as well. You need to use an account that charges your credit card. But the good news is that most of them have a free tier, a free platform. And generally the rule is you can have one instance running serially your CI work for free. Some of them offer open source incentives. So if your project's on GitHub and it's open source, you can have like the second tier for free. So maybe you get 4 simultaneous instances. So your builds will go a lot faster. If you're a one-man shop, one-woman shop, probably one serialized build instance is probably good enough. So thanks for the question. This third question, I don't appreciate as much. Where are the slides? They'll be available. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll post them out at some point. And I hope today I've inspired you to either expand on your current CI or to go investigate CI, either on a project that doesn't have CI yet or one that might have it. And that's my talk. Thank you, everybody.